Now that Xenoblade 3 has been out for a while, I decided it was finally time to attempt a challenge run. But thinking back through previous runs, I knew there was one that had to come first above all. If only I knew what I was about to get myself into. So without further delay, it's time to complete the trilogy. Complete the trilogy with Xenoblade 3, but I level backwards. And how this challenge works is simple. I'm going to be playing through Xenoblade 3, but after every battle, the party drops a level, starting from 99. Now with this in mind, here's a quick question. What level do you think the party will be at by the time I reach the final boss? Now keep that answer to yourself, or if you're feeling really daring, put that answer in the comments below. Now we all remember how the game opens, right? Noah, Uni and Lanz are on their way to their colony-mandated beach vacation, which is abruptly cut short from an attack by Colony Sigma. But unfortunately for those Colony Sigma mudders, their opponents being level 99 meant the battle was over before it had even started. Something worth mentioning is due to the wonders of New Game Plus, I'm like 99% sure you can skip fighting the two foggy Piranhas, but I did it anyway. Now something that did surprise me was just how many battles there were during Chapter 1. I mean, just from that opening sequence alone, there were 12 battles, and to put that into perspective, it takes until Chapter 2 of both Xenoblade 1 and 2 to have this many fights. Now of course I know that all three games are paced very differently, but even so, the fact that this is how the game opens, saying I'm scared for what's to come is an understatement. Now Mwamba is not happy. He wasn't invited to the beach, and angrily leaves the team. But it's his loss, as not long after, Noah and the gang encounter who tell the party of a magical hot spring in the Cadencia region, before being given the snap by the sudden appearance of Thanos, thus ending the chapter at an eye-watering level 65. Oh, and Mio, Tyon and Senna also decide to tag along, but they won't be important till later. So with the newly formed party on the quest for the fabled hot spring, we start Chapter 2. Now this chapter was mostly unremarkable. I suppose it's worth mentioning that the Guyana Aspar you fight to unlock chain attacks, you technically fight twice, but since the first part ends halfway, I've decided to only count it as one battle, finishing Chapter 2 at level 47. But did anyone else find it weird that Monolith Soft decided to give Console K a 40-minute speech on why Xenoblade X should be ported to the new 3DS? I guess it was just a meta commentary meant to tell the player that Mobius aren't normal entities, but who knows? So Chapter 3 is where things start to grow concerning, as I've been dropping levels fast, and although I'm not experiencing much difficulty yet, the fact that by the end of this chapter the party was level 29, I was starting to think that we'd be hitting level 1 before long. Now my playstyle up until this point hadn't exactly been very strategical. I think Sun Tzu put it best. If you get a system that works, stick to it. And Sun Tzu was a known Xenoblade fan, so I think he knows a little more than most people. Anyway, I've been keeping everyone as their base classes, and heavily relying on the true power of Ouroboros. This was because there wasn't really a need to try anything else. The fact that the party never takes damage while interlinking meant this was a foolproof method. Now one thing that I think is worth mentioning, although I didn't test it, is I think all the Savant Arachno during the Princess Arachno fight might have been avoidable using single target attacks, as although the Princess summoned more helpers, after the initial 5 were taken out, upon beating the Princess, the fight immediately ended, meaning I probably could have saved a few levels. Chapter 4 was an extremely significant chapter for a multitude of reasons. The first? It had Juniper in it. The second? It contains one of my favourite scenes in the game. The third? The fourth? Did I mention it has Juniper in it? And finally, the fifth. It marked the first wall in progress. Now let's play a quick game. Where do you think the first wall in progress occurred? Was it A, the Agnes fighters, as there was 5 of them? B, the fight against Ethel and Kamaravi's Phoroneses? Or C, the fight between Mobius, D and J? And in 3, 2, 1, the correct answer is B. If you guess correctly, you win the knowledge that you are now manually breathing. Anyway, yes, the fight between Ethel and Kamaravi's Phoroneses proved to be the first wall in progress. And it was bad. I mean, really bad. I'm talking, it was as if Ethel saw us and just decided to... And then Kamaravi comes along and just... Which means Noah needed to grab some pudding and then... And... So yeah, it was bad. And most of the time, the party would be wiped out before I could even beat one Phorones. I figured bringing Valdi in for his chain attack bonus made the most sense, but even then, doing this fight at level 17 meant I could hardly stay alive long enough to build gauge, so I went back to the drawing board and kept slamming my head into the wall. Now I'll be honest, long-time channel fans will know my stubbornness when it comes to certain video games, and Xenoblade is no exception. Usually it starts when I get within a slither of victory, knowing the current strategy I'm using can work, and unfortunately, seeing how close I was to toppling Ethel's Phorones just made me want to keep trying over and over again, until eventually... That's it, 1 down. And then, surprise surprise, having only 1 enemy and 3 healers meant Kamaravi's Phorones went down soon after. Now eagle-eyed viewers would have noticed that the party leveled up from this encounter, which unveils the 6th significant reason Chapter 4 was so important, as it marks the turning point in these level down challenge runs that means if I use my chain attacks effectively, I can perhaps gain more levels than I would normally, adding an extra layer of strategy if I want to avoid the potential impossibility of hitting too low a level. But none of that matters at the moment, as I beat O&P on the first try and level up to 20, breaking even as I move back down to 17 after those 3 encounters. With overflowing confidence, the Beach Brigade, featuring Valdi, move on to tackle the Destroy the Annihilator side quest, only to be met with another wall in progress, that being the ever evil Mobius, D and J. So I'll spare you the details, but I spent about an hour retrying this fight until eventually I caved and made half the team healers. But honestly, this shook me, as I genuinely didn't expect any solo enemies to be that big of an issue, so I was dreading the later encounter with D and J. However, regardless, ending Chapter 4, the party was level 18. Now something I haven't really been mentioning is enemy aggro, mainly because it hasn't really been a problem, and that was true up until Kevis Castle and the prison intel gathering segments. But I found the best way to get past certain sections was just to keep running in circles until eventually you got the one run that worked out. Now after relying so heavily on interlinking, when the Beach Brigade decides to infiltrate the prison, everything in the initial strategy goes to shit. Did you know? The Gondor fight in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is actually skippable if you lose the fight on purpose. Well, that's all the time I've got. Be sure to subscribe to Penguin00 for more facts like this one. Oh, and something funny I should mention, and I genuinely don't know how this happened, but Triton managed to sneak his way into the party during the Gondor fight. I guess he just heard there was a punch-up going on and wanted to be a part of it, but when I realised, I immediately turned the game off. Sorry, Triton. But anyway, having the power of Ouroboros sealed meant one thing. The Basrique Ferris went from easy kill to almost impossible. Because of this I brought Fiona onto the team. 1, because I wanted to see if extending chain attacks would help, and 2, because I just think she's neat. But annoyingly, no one could survive long enough to keep building chain gauge, so I equipped almost everyone with a brute memory, and after a few chaotic attempts and a side of luck, I managed to conquer the Ferris. Then next up was the main event, okay, all the hard work you've done up till now to keep your level high is being thrown away because here's 9 prison guards for you to beat, dropping your level down to 2 before the end fight. Luckily it wasn't that bad, as I had the power of interlinking return to me, and a couple of good chain attacks meant I'd recovered most of the lost levels, meaning I started the M fight at level 12, and then my luck continued as I proceeded to beat M, N, and the Queen of Agnes, all on my first attempts. So ending Chapter 5, the party was level 25, and starting the main bulk of Chapter 6, the party was level 30. Before going into this challenge, it was Chapter 6 that I was the most afraid of, but after coming this far, I was actually quite surprised on how many Horde type battles Xenoblade 3 has. And I know that's not technically the correct term to use, but that's what it feels like coming out of the prison escape and now advancing on Colony Omega. And let me tell you, these fights in Colony Omega were hard, because the sheer number of enemies, even having almost everyone as healer, didn't accomplish much. So I just had to make everyone interlink as quickly as possible and then take out as many enemies as I could in the time before the interlink went down. And after a couple of attempts and a few accessory swaps, I succeeded on both hordes. Now what I didn't expect was to have that much trouble with the Miyabi fight, but I was wrong. Really wrong, because Miyabi had enlisted the help of a vengeful Mwamba who had been on a training arc of his own since not being invited to join the Beach Brigade way back in Chapter 1, and it's safe to say the might of Mwamba left the party steamrolled, so forced to go back to the drawing board, I changed nothing about my strategy until eventually I won. Then Chunk caused no problem, so the Beach Brigade kept on moving until the fabled rematch with D and J. So I don't have much to say about these fights, other than to gloat that I did them all on my first try. However, upon reviewing the footage, I noticed something. What on earth is that thing? Upon closer inspection, it's a summon from J called Mobius Puppet, but I never noticed it. From the footage it appears it was beaten while interlinking, but then assumably it changes form from D to J, so I have no clue if my total is one off, or if that's just how it goes during the fight. Regardless, at the end of Chapter 6, the party is level 28. On to the finale now. Chapter 7 started out relatively easy. That was until approaching the first mountain, the N rematch. Phase 1 was easy as I pulled it off on my first try. Phase 2, however, there was death after death, party wipe after party wipe. I genuinely thought this is where the run would end, as I would just get so far but then fall short the second N decided to use Glimmering Swiftblade. The only strategy I'd come up with was just to save chain attacks and interlinking for when this move was about to land, to avoid taking critical damage. And eventually...
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
So with N out of the way, the X fight was skipped due to the joy of not having to do Uni's side story, and Chunk went down on my first try. There was a bit of trouble with the Korea flak, and a funny moment trying to avoid enemy aggro, but nothing really changed in the strategy, so it was time for our final boss. Now going into this final fight I was level 25, so if you guessed by the time I reached the final boss I'd be level 25, then congratulations. Now, it's on record that the fight against Zed is my least favourite across the Xenoblade trilogy, mainly due to the lack of checkpoints, so I was gutted to find out that no matter what I tried, I couldn't even get past the first phase. Zed would just use Sovereign Purge and wipe out my entire team in seconds, causing me to start the fight all over again. But what made this fight so difficult was the fact that I could no longer interlink or chain attack, meaning I had completely lost both of my crutches, and was at the complete mercy of RNG. Of course I tried a few other strategies, but nothing seemed to work. Every attempt ending in failure was soul crushing. I had genuinely hoped to complete this challenge, but unable to see a way forward, I knew what it was time to do. Okay, I did not feel good about doing this, and who knows, perhaps there are better players out there who could have pulled it off, but I was 99% sure I had no chance of success. So I re-enter the fight, and I was only reliably able to get past the first phase. Furious at myself for having accomplished nothing, I went to bed, when the wildest thing happened. I had a dream where I was sitting in a room, completely alone, with the voice of Zed behind me screaming about how I should
Let the stage of battle freeze your marrow.
It was complete torment, so the next day I got up, immediately went in for the rematch, and still lost. Words cannot describe how desperate I was to win this challenge. I would do anything, but after hours and hours of attempts, and constantly being booted back to the main menu, I was at a complete loss. So it's moments like these, when I'm at my lowest, that I do the one thing that never fails to motivate me. Watch my favourite Etika highlights.
It's too, oh shit. Mitch, chill. Damn nigga.
So with my motivation restored, I go back into the Zed fight, and as if the RNG gods smiled upon me, a miracle occurred, and I not only got past the first phase, but the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth? How many phases does this guy have again? Like 11? Damn. Either way, I make it all the way to the last phase. Victory is in sight. Just a little further and...
What? You are joking. Nia, please help me.
Reviewing that clip, you can pinpoint the exact moment I lost my sanity. And to back that up, here's a moment on a later attempt where I just randomly started laughing. Zed had won. But honestly, doing this challenge has actually made me appreciate Zed as a villain way more than I'd ever expect, as what I was doing truly was the Endless Now. I don't know how Monolith Soft did it, but they genuinely made a perfect villain who completely embodies all the negative themes the game was trying to convey, and I was just dancing to their tune. But remember way earlier in the video where I said once I get a taste of something working, I can't give up? Well, one costume change and 3 more hours of attempts later, I made it back to the final phase. This time, I knew I had to always have at least one interlink pair active to avoid the party wipe, and sure enough...
Oh, finally. Let's go.
But either way, the challenge had been completed and time moved forward once again. It's normally at this point that I would try to flex and beat Zed at level 1, but are you kidding me? There's no way I'll be able to do that. Maybe with a broken soul hacker loadout, or using the party-wide invincibility from Lucky 7, but I'll leave that to the more skilled players. So with that said, if you enjoyed my suffering, leave a like, and as always...